I wish for you a happy life. I don't remember where I heard this story, and it may have been one of you who told it to me, but it has stuck in my head about a woman who was going through her baby box. Now, maybe one of you has a baby box on the top shelf in your closet or somewhere in the basement, and maybe you put in there the things that go in a baby box. I checked out one of my daughters, and we found that there were the pictures of the ultrasound, and there were the photographs that they take in the hospital before the baby goes home. There was the pink knitted cap that goes on the baby's head. There were cards, good wishes, sent from our friends and family. Her baby box. And she opened it up, and she was going through it, and she found this note from her grandfather. And it said, "My dearest granddaughter, I wish for you a happy life." So simple, and yet so profound and powerful. My dearest one, I wish for you a happy life. And I think that's what we all want. And when I think about that word happiness, we sometimes say, oh, well, happiness isn't as great as joy. Happiness is just dependent on our circumstances. We can be happy because something good happened to us. But then if something bad happens, our happiness leaves. But I don't think that that's what this grandfather intended by a happy life. And I think that this is more the happiness, the experience of joy, contentment, well-being, combined with the sense that one's life is good and meaningful and worthwhile. That's a definition by positive psychologist Sonia Lubinsky. I believe that this is what we want for our children, for ourselves, and for people everywhere. And I believe this is what God desires for all of God's sons and daughters everywhere. Now, our daughter, Emma, whose baby box I was going through, is studying abroad in Copenhagen. And we've been told over and over that Denmark is one of the happiest nations in the world. And so I looked this up. And as the story goes, a little more than a decade ago, the economist Jeffrey Sachs wanted to prove that happiness should be based on more than just money. It's got to be more than money that makes people happy. Because the well-being of nations had always been based on gross domestic product. How much money a nation made was the basis for how well a country was doing. And so Sachs, who also works in sustainable development, refused to believe that that was the correct, and he developed a measurement for well-being called the Gross Domestic Happiness Indicator, the World Happiness Report. And what he looked at was gross domestic product as well as life expectancy, but also, do you have someone to count on? Do you have a sense of freedom to make your life decisions? Do you trust your environment? And how often do you find yourself working for the good of others? Do you have someone to count on? Can you make your decisions in freedom? Do you trust that the people around you and their government is good? Are you generous? Well, it turns out that researchers found that people in every nation of the world rate happiness as more important and different from the accumulation of wealth, acquiring material goods, and even more important than getting into heaven. Sometimes I wonder if we in Washington, D.C. think we should be happy. Certainly, we should be angry at all the things that are wrong in the world, and we should be disgusted and aggrieved, or at least sad. Are we supposed to or allowed to be happy? Yet happiness is a key aspect of our faith. Now, this doesn't mean that if we don't feel happy, we don't have faith. No, absolutely not. It means that in the Judeo-Christian tradition, God is deeply concerned about our happiness. Happy is the first word of the first psalm in our book of Psalms. The first word. Now, some translations will say blessed. Blessed are those who do not sit in the seat of scoffers. But these are two different words in the Hebrew. Blessed is from the word Baruch, and is all about God's actions towards us. God blesses us, and it's all about God's movement towards us. But the word happy comes from the word Asher, which is also about our responsibility to God's blessing. What is our response? So it involves our agency, our action. Happy asks something of us. There are a couple other words in here that make us just shut down. And righteous and wicked, right? It sounds just like, really? We're going to hear about righteousness and we're going to hear about the wicked? Am I right? Don't you just be like, no. Well, in psalm language, the wicked, the sinners, the scoffers are those who think they already have all the answers. Let me say that again. The wicked, the sinners, the scoffers are those who refuse to learn. They think they know it all. The scoffers only want to rely on themselves. They don't need anyone else, especially not God. The righteous and righteousness is all about a right relationship with God. It's about having a humble, teachable heart. The righteous know that they do not have all the answers. The righteous know that they need a community to have a happy life. They look to the teachings of God, the God of love, in order to find happiness. Wickedness and righteousness are not terms about moral behavior. It's all an attitude of the heart. Do you want to know more, or have you got it all figured out? So the righteous delight in learning about God, in learning about the power of love and the meaning of grace and the energy of the Holy Spirit. Happy are those who delight in learning God's ways. In the psalm, it says the law. Well, what is the law according to Jesus? Jesus summed up all the law and the prophets in one commandment. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind, and you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So, having a teachable heart with a desire to understand the way of God's love, this is what it means to be happy. And this is what it is to be a tree planted by streams of water, rooted in the way of love. All summer we've been talking about the fruit of the Spirit. And this psalm tells us that when we are rooted in the Spirit, we bear good fruit. We are resilient. The leaves don't wither. We always have a source of life, and that is the true meaning of the word prosper. It doesn't mean that if we're faithful, we get rich. It means that when we are rooted in learning the love of God, we always have a source of strength and life. The fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity, faithful, gentleness, self-control. I think these describe a happy life. This is contrasted with a way of life that is set up to be unhappy. The sinners, the scoffers, and the wicked are not punished. It's a result from not being connected to love. And a source of grace. And we might say, well, the whole psalm is just naive because we know that the righteous, good people who are teachable, especially those who work for justice and love of neighbor, often know pain and suffering. And anybody suffers, whether we're righteous or not. But the psalm is not about that. We all suffer. The question is, will we suffer for love? And whether or not we're suffering for love, when we suffer, will we seek out a community that loves us and a connection to the love of God? Or are we going to try and go it alone? Are we going to live self-reliant, already knowing all we need to know, trying to always get the things we think that will make us happy? Or will we seek to learn the ways of God and the ways of love, knowing that we will never know it all and that life is a constant learning? Will we seek to know community and what it means to love God and love neighbor? I want to live a happy life. Sometimes I struggle with being happy. But I want to keep learning. I want to keep trying to connect with God. I want to keep finding those sources of water. I'm so grateful that I get to baptize children. I'm so grateful for you that you get to watch a baptism. Because every time we do, we are reminded of God's grace and that sign and that seal of the real presence of God with us always. And isn't it wonderful that we have this water on the day of the streams of water? When we baptize, when we celebrate baptism, we plant trees by streams of water. We all just took a promise to teach Tyler. We promise to instruct those who are baptized in the ways of God's love. We commit to showing how to love God and neighbor, and as we do, we dig our roots deeper into that good soil of grace. We create community. We grow community. We are one. We support one another. We are there for each other in hardship and in suffering. In baptism, we are a forest of trees planted by streams of God's holy, loving Spirit, water that bears beautiful, good fruit, while our branches are intertwined and holding on to one another. In our faith tradition, this is what it means to have a happy life. Take a moment and look around you. Do it. Look around you. Those on Zoom have it easier. All they have to do is look at the squares, do the screens. We baptized Tyler Patrick Sadusky today, and he is our newest sapling, planted and soaked. Tricia got a little soaked, because I like to use a lot of water. As an expression of our baptismal promise to Tyler, and an action of our love as a community, there are blue cards that you will find, or they might be pink or green. It's a 2x4 card, index card. That's what it is. We did this in the last baptism. I want you to find one and something to write with, and write a hope, a dream, a blessing for Tyler. You can sign your name. You don't have to. Maybe if you can't write yet, you can draw a picture. We're going to collect those and give them to Tricia and Dan to put in Tyler's baby box, so that one day when Tyler is going through that box he finds on the top shelf of a closet, and he goes through it, he can experience all the love of this community of faith. Our Heidelberg Catechism asks, what is the chief end of man? What is the goal and purpose of our humanity? And the response is, man's chief end is to glorify God and enjoy God forever. God created us to shine the light of God's love and to live in happiness always. God has written a note to each and every one of us. I wish for you, my dear ones, I wish for you a happy life. Amen.